Some Chinese media reports use headlines to mischaracterize overseas vaccines, but internal documents show they haven't had much success in promoting China's version. A Chinese actress is left floundering after a scandal goes public. It involves her 2 children born from surrogate mothers and sheds light on the practice in the country. The Biden administration gives investors more time to toss their holdings in blacklisted Chinese firms. They now have until May, though President Trump's original deadline expires Thursday. And a new Chinese law gives its Coast Guard permission to open fire. That's when foreign vessels enter disputed waters. Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. First, we look to the Chinese Communist Party virus vaccines. New Chinese media reports seem to be pushing some contradictory claims about vaccines made overseas. A number of them published stories focus on U.S. drug maker Moderna, using article headlines to claim the World Health Organization does not recommend its CCP virus vaccine. In reality, the WHO did recommend the Moderna vaccine, discouraging its use only for pregnant mothers and those who may be severely allergic to its components. China's state-controlled media outlets have been publicizing the deaths of vaccine recipients in Western countries for weeks, with an apparent focus on the U.S. The effort appears to be targeting the reputation of foreign vaccines. But China's misleading articles aren't limited to covering the U.S. They've also taken the words of Norway's national drug regulatory body to suggest a link between vaccine doses and death cases. Newspaper China Daily and broadcaster Xinhua News Agency have published headlines claiming Norwegian health authorities say some deaths were likely related to vaccine use. But Norway regulators actually said reactions like fever do not necessarily imply that a causal relationship has been established between the event and the vaccines. While Chinese media outlets draw attention to vaccine use in the West, virus cases are surging in Shanghai, China's largest mega city. Authorities there are launching vaccination efforts for medical staff and others at high risk of infection. Over 800,000 have reportedly been vaccinated. But internal documents we obtained suggest not everyone there is willing to accept Chinese-made vaccines. The documents come from Shanghai's Jing'an district. They say that out of over 110,000 residents, just under 25,000 of them are willing to accept a vaccine made in China. That's only about 20%, or 1/5, of those surveyed. Comments from China Affairs analyst Li Lingyi may shed light on the figures. Li explains that past vaccine scandals in China have caused distrust in domestic vaccines, and says the Chinese regime's attempts to censor true information have also played a role. The son of a CCP virus victim in Wuhan is demanding to meet the World Health Organization expert team now visiting the city. The victim's son says the WHO team should speak with affected families who are being muffled by the Chinese Communist Party. NTD's Chang Chun has more.
Zhang Hai is the son of a CCP virus victim in Wuhan. He believes it's very important for WHO experts to speak with affected families who are being muffled by the Chinese Communist Party, or the CCP. The expert team is visiting Wuhan, the epicenter of the pandemic last year. Members of the team can talk with Chinese scientists, but it is unclear if they will be allowed to gather evidence or talk to families.
If they only look at the information prepared by authorities in Wuhan City and Hubei province, they can only assume that the spread started in January last year, not to mention finding the source. Even the time when the virus started to spread would be misleading. Only by listening to the experiences of victims' relatives can they better understand the timeline of the outbreak and find out the real source.
The WHO visit was approved by the CCP after months of negotiations. Zhang says the WHO is easily influenced by Chinese authorities. He hopes these experts don't become a tool in spreading the regime's lies.
I would like to meet with the WHO so they can hear the experience of these families. At the same time, I hope that they can use their actions and facts to change people's perceptions of the organization. As an international organization, they should have their independence and their rigor.
Zhang's father died of the CCP virus on February 1, 2020. That's after he traveled to Wuhan and got infected there. Zhang says that if authorities did not cover up the pandemic, he would not have brought his father to Wuhan. He calls the regime's cover-up a criminal act and doesn't want the WHO to be coming to China just to cover up these crimes.
The local government has not even acknowledged its cover-up, and they're killing people so far. Not even a minimal apology. If the WHO is influenced by them and said something that is not true, it will become harder for us to speak out and hold the authorities accountable. I must remind the WHO experts, if you put on a show, go through a pre-scheduled plan, then say some words that are not truthful. This thing is going to enter the history books, and your words will bear some responsibility and consequences.
Relatives of some other virus victims tried to sue authorities, but all of them have been suppressed. Right after the WHO experts arrived in China this month, the victims' relatives saw their chat group on social media shut down. Reporting by Chang Chun, NTD News.
A Chinese celebrity is now in the crosshairs of public outcry. That's because her ex-partner is accusing her of abandoning the couple's 2 children, both carried by surrogates in the U.S. Chinese actress Zhen Shuang's ex-partner revealed the news last week, saying he had been stuck in the U.S. for a year, taking care of the 2 children. Media reports say the couple broke up after the 2 surrogate mothers they hired were already pregnant with their kids. An audio clip where the actress can be heard agonizing over what to do with the kids also came to light.
So abortion is not possible. I'm so frustrated.
The incident sparked outrage on social media. One netizen accused Zhen of seeing her children as merchandise and abandoning them on a whim. The scandal is taking a serious toll on Zhen's career. Brands, including Prada, have dropped their partnerships with her. China's film industry regulator also condemned her for lacking personal virtue, explaining they won't promote celebrities involved in scandals. Responding to the outcry, she called the situation, quote, a very sad and private matter, and added that she didn't violate any laws. The incident since provoked heated public discussion about surrogacy. Chinese state-run media put out an article saying the country prohibited all kinds of surrogacy. At the same time, the Communist Party's legal commission accused the actress of taking advantage of legal loopholes. Despite the rules, surrogacy is a widespread practice in China. A 2009 survey showed that over 12% of Chinese people at childbearing age, or 40 million people, were infertile. The issue comes after decades of the Communist Party's one-child policy, including forced abortions and sterilization for those who had broke the rules and had multiple children. The Chinese regime touted that the policy prevented 400 million children from being born. But the unexpected consequences are far-reaching.
How many people died from forced abortions? How many people died on the operating table from those abortions done because of overbirth? Or how many people are injured and crippled for life and therefore can never have children? How many people use the regime's experimental drugs and thus can never have children, and then cause sterilization and what? It's a lifetime of such suffering.
When the Chinese regime loosed the one-child restriction in 2016, many couples were no longer able to conceive even if they wanted to. The country's birth rate is now at a historic low with a looming demographic crisis. A Hong Kong column points out that most Chinese people can't afford the high price tag or navigate the legal concerns of surrogacy. That means the real consumers are often senior Communist Party officials and other interest groups associated with them. But the columnist noted this group often escapes public scrutiny thanks to their power and connections, and are affected little by the potential danger the unmonitored practice can cause to Chinese women. Just 2 days before news of Zhen's scandal broke out, Chinese media outlet Caixin published an investigative report. It tells the story of a Shanghai gangster forcing several women to become surrogate mothers, to the detriment of their personal health. One was reportedly taken to a clinic blindfolded while her reproductive material was surgically taken without consent or pain medication. Some of the women became infertile as a result. Local court judges and police were allegedly bribed in order to protect the gangster. Surrogacy practices have even become forms of bribery in China. In 2016, a businessman reportedly helped China's former deputy finance minister to find a surrogate mother and paid for her services. That was in exchange for tens of millions of dollars of the regime's industry subsidies. In China, certain companies have names similar but not identical to communist Chinese military companies. Under Biden, the U.S. Treasury Department is temporarily allowing American investment into those companies. NTD's Kevin Hogan breaks this down for us.
Let's go.
Under the Trump administration, the U.S. banned investment in Chinese military companies. Trump set a deadline for Thursday to stop investment in companies that have similar names. But now Biden's administration has extended that deadline to late May. Geopolitical expert Brandon Weichert explains some of the potential dangers with delaying the ban.
If the Chinese are doing bad things and they're hiding it behind these kind of pseudonym companies, we're going to be purchasing it for another 6 months, another 5 months. So those products, if they're compromised, we'll be integrating compromised, potentially, products into our defense supply chain.
Zooming out a bit, we examine why the ban on communist Chinese military companies is important to Americans and the U.S. military to begin with. Weichert says there's a balance between not overspending tax dollars and being willing to buy from China, who he says doesn't play fair.
And what it really means is that the equipment and material that our fighting men and women rely on a daily basis could very well be compromised. It could be designed to fail. It could be designed to be hacked at a moment's notice that could disrupt the normal, readiness of a American military unit.
The order listed on the Treasury Department's website also prohibits securities transactions with banned Chinese military companies. In November, former President Trump continued with his hardline approach to Beijing by banning the investment in these companies. Weichert offers his projection on Biden's approach to China.
You can expect not just complete abandonment of Trump policies such as the ban that he enacted before he left, but also I think you are going to see a degree of stabilization in the Sino-American relationship because the Biden team really wants to focus on Russia. It's the low-hanging fruit, and they really want to get more involved, I think, wrongly in Syria. And so I think those two things are going to negate the ability for the United States to really go too hard against China the way that Trump did.
Biden's approach to China has yet to become completely clear. Weichert said Biden's cabinet picks are more aggressive in terms of their China policy, all while U.S. naval forces rival China's military in the contested South China Sea after Biden's inauguration. Kevin Hogan, NTD News.
Wall Street firms are reversing their decision to drop Chinese companies linked to the communist regime's People's Liberation Army, or PLA. That's after President Biden extended a deadline set by the Trump administration. The previous administration asked Americans to stop investing in military-tied Chinese companies. MSCI and FTSE Russell announced that they would not kick out 5 Chinese firms they previously said they would from their stock indexes yet. The 5 firms are from sectors such as nuclear power, petrochemical, and shipbuilding. Most are military contractors, and 4 of them are owned by the Chinese regime. President Trump gave Americans until the end of the month to stop putting their money into these companies. The Treasury Department under President Biden, however, says it had extended the deadline to May. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki says the U.S. is against using telecom equipment from Chinese tech giant Huawei. The U.S. suspects Huawei of having ties to the regime's military and posing a national security risk. That's after a reporter questioned whether the new administration is taking a more nuanced approach to China. The reporter mentioned that the nominee for Commerce Secretary refused to blacklist Huawei.
Is this some kind of caving into China, or is that a nuanced way to deal with China?
So I think the second reference, I think, was to Huawei, right? And then yes. So let me just convey clearly our position on this. Let us be clear, telecommunications equipment made by untrusted vendors, including Huawei, is a threat to the security of the U.S. and our allies. We'll ensure that the American telecommunications network do not use equipment from untrusted vendors.
Psaki says the administration will work with allies to make sure that they also use safe networks. The Trump administration banned the use of Huawei equipment, citing risk to national security. The Commerce Department under President Trump also put Huawei onto a trade blacklist. A congressional commission is holding a hearing on U.S.-China relations today. In it, China experts were asked one unexpected question. NTD's Juliet Song reports.
A commission handling U.S.-China relations held a hearing on Thursday. There, one official touched on Chinese leader Xi Jinping's range of unprecedented power, posing a bold question.
What happens if Xi dies?
Cleveland is the vice chairman of the commission that hosts the hearing. The meeting serves to evaluate current U.S.-China relations, the Chinese Communist Party's goals, and their implications for the U.S. An expert says while China's Xi may be seen as the country's supreme leader, he still has factions to contend with.
I think if we did see, as you said, his passing, we would see a power struggle within China.
Another expert says he thinks the challenge for the U.S. is to build a strategy that manages two possible worlds. One is that a world where China continues to grow fairly quickly
and increase its military capabilities and its economic leverage throughout Asia and the rest of the world, but also a world in which I think we could all imagine a genuine political crisis over the next decade. Leading to, the dissolution of the Chinese state.
Cooper says both outcomes are possible, but he thinks that the China debate in the U.S. often assumes the first.
It assumes that 40 years of incredible Chinese successes on the economic side are going to continue without accepting the possibility that they might not.
He thinks there's risk to that.
And the biggest risk, from my point of view, is that countries in the region actually start to believe this, right? And think that they can make big bets on China and that those are riskless bets.
Cooper asks, it's the United States' job to show that even though democracies aren't perfect,
even in difficult periods, democracies can handle leadership transitions.
He says it's hard to imagine the same thing would happen in China if Xi stepped down. Other experts at the hearing said China continues to challenge the U.S. on multiple fronts. They recommend the U.S. continues taking strong countermeasures against the Chinese regime. Juliet Song, NTD News.
The CCP says its Coast Guard is now allowed to open fire on foreign vessels. That's according to a controversial law the party just passed. It empowers the Coast Guard to use, quote, all necessary means to stop threats from foreign vessels sailing into waters under China's jurisdiction. Beijing doesn't specify its jurisdiction, but it's possible for the law to be applied to the disputed waters in the East and South China Seas. The law also allows the Coast Guard to launch preemptive strikes without prior warning. An expert says the law will mostly go against several international law norms and obligations, including UN conventions that China signed into. The CCP in recent years ramped up militarization of strategically important waters. Party Chairman Xi Jinping promised President Obama back in 2015 that he wouldn't do it, but he did it anyway. That's after both the U.S. and an international tribunal denied the CCP's claims to the territory. This week, the U.S. reaffirmed its promise to defend the Philippines against any attack in the South China Sea. The Philippines is canceling a $10 billion airport plan with a Chinese state-owned firm. The firm was sanctioned by the Trump administration last year for helping the Chinese regime build military bases in the South China Sea. The Philippines says the decision was not related to the U.S. sanction. Its foreign minister has previously suggested that the Philippines should stop working on infrastructure projects involving Chinese companies on the U.S. blacklist. But the Filipino president rejected the request and said they need Chinese investment. The president embraced Chinese money that built infrastructure in key sectors, including energy and telecommunications. This despite public anger over territorial disputes with Communist China. He also threatened to cut ties with the Philippines' long-term ally, the United States. The head of German carmaker Volkswagen says China is on the right track in terms of human rights. At the World Economic Forum, a CNBC anchor asked how the West should engage with a partner who he said doesn't always play fair and crosses the line in terms of human rights.
And crosses the line when it comes to the treatment of many of its own citizens.
I think that China is moving in the right direction. I think the treaty between Europe and China is a good move forward.
The Volkswagen chairman said the automaker is advocating for further opening up and commitment towards China. China is a critical market for Volkswagen. Every 4 in 10 Volkswagen cars are made in Chinese factories, while the carmaker's sales in mainland China account for a major part of company profit. HSBC is in the spotlight for freezing the accounts of a Hong Kong pro-democracy activist. UK politicians accuse the British bank of eroding democracy. NTD's Patrick Hayden has the details.
British lawmakers pressured HSBC CEO Noel Quinn over aiding Beijing's crackdown on democracy in Hong Kong. The bank recently froze the account of a former Hong Kong lawmaker and pro-democracy activist.
But there must come a point in some societies where it is impossible for a decent business to carry on when the activities of the government there are so evil or wicked. Would you accept that, or are you saying there is no such point in Hong Kong?
I am nowhere near that point in Hong Kong.
American and British shareholders criticised the bank after an Asia executive publicly endorsed Beijing's Hong Kong national security law by signing a petition. When it was implemented last year, many no longer considered Hong Kong a free city. The law includes being able to extradite suspected criminals to mainland China.
You're very careful to say we don't make ethical judgments about anything at all, when I don't know what your definition of a political or indeed ethical judgment is, but somebody coming out in favour of a one-party state's undermining of China's two systems approach seems to me to be a pretty loaded ethical and political statement.
Clearly, if I think about our position in Hong Kong, and I don't want to use the word ethics because particularly that's open to interpretation, but I believe we're doing the right thing for Hong Kong.
Members of Parliament consistently brought up that HSBC regularly comments on ethical topics including Brexit and environmentalism, but when it came to commenting on the crackdown, Quinn avoided taking any stance. HSBC takes about 2/3 of its profits in Hong Kong, so moving out of the city is not an option. Reporting from London, Patrick Hayden, NTD News.
And that's all for today's China in Focus. Thanks for watching and see you tomorrow. Hi, we're happy to announce that you can also catch us on cable TV now. Millions of households already choose us as one of their trusted news sources, and you can too. You can watch us in Chicago, Washington, D.C., New York, and many other cities as well. And if your system doesn't carry NTD yet, you can just give them a quick call and request NTD on your cable provider. Thank you for watching. See you next time.